Hey, everybody, welcome to another fabulous episode of The Thoughtful Bro. I'm here with really what I would call the woman of the hour, the woman of the summer, Alison Espach. The Wedding People is on everybody's list. I just got a bunch of texts yesterday from my cousins in Louisville who were saying they're going to do this next for their book club. So they are tuning in today. Shout out to the book club in Louisville. A few words about Thoughtful Bro and everything else before we get started with Alison today. We're live streaming on Facebook and YouTube as always. Welcome everybody wherever you are. Thank you for joining us again. We are here, as you know, every Tuesday to talk about what makes great books tick, what makes great authors tick. A Mighty Blaze, where we air, along with a bunch of other great shows, is a volunteer initiative that started during COVID to help connect writers and readers virtually. At A Mighty Blaze, we're never asking for money. If you want to show us the love, you can just follow us, tell your friends about us, like our videos, and so on. Ask questions in the chat. We always love it when people ask questions. But if you are in the mood to spend money, I have an idea. You could spend it on books about a very big wedding filled with very rich and very unhappy people who are all in love with the wrong people, I will add. Books that ask the question, is any wedding too big to fail? Books like The Wedding People by Alison Espach. Please open up a couple browser tabs, buy through bookshop.org, supporting independent bookstores. Again, if you have any questions for Alison, pop them in the chat. They will make their way to me, and I'll ask them at the end. And now, on to this week's guest. Alison's debut novel was The Adults, which was a New York Times Editor's Choice and Barnes & Noble Discover pick. Her second novel, which came out in 2022, is called Notes on Your Sudden Disappearance. It was an Indie Next pick and an Amazon Editor's pick for 2022. She also has, and I was loved finding this out, and I spent the weekend listening to a bunch of this. She has an Audible-only series called In-Depth Market Research Interviews with Dead People, which is very funny. She's written for McSweeney's, Vogue, Outside Magazine, Joyland, and other places. She got her MFA from Washington University in St. Louis, and now she teaches creative writing at Providence College in Rhode Island. Her latest book, her third book, The Wedding People, is an instant New York Times bestseller. I think it debuted at number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list. It's also a Today Show Read With Jenna book club pick. It was named one of the best books of the summer 24 by People, Bustle, Star Tribune, Goodreads, LitHub, and more. And it's getting comps to Sally Rooney and Curtis Sittenfeld. The book is absurd. It's hilarious. It's wise. It's sad. It's perfectly executed. And it has A+ top shelf banter. I come for the story. I stay for the banter. The Washington Post writes, Espach's wit and warmth deliver a gratifying story about people who have given up. Oh my God, I'm just going to start that right over again. The Washington Post said, Espach's wit and warmth deliver a gratifying story about how people who have given up might find a reason to start caring again. Alison Espach, welcome to The Thoughtful Bro.
Oh man, that was quite an introduction. Thank you, Mark.
Why they pay me the small bucks? Okay, so like I said, I thought the book was terrific. I read it over the last few days. Now, I always read it over the last few days, but I was just thinking how strange it is for some reason this morning, although it's true for all my interviews, how strange it is that I consumed in the last 24 hours what it took you years and years to write. It's just...
How did that feel?
It felt great. It felt great. I am on cloud 9 right now because I thought the book was so flippin' funny. And I'll tell you what I think is the greatest testament to your success in writing is that I have this irrepressible urge and sort of unbearable urge to stalk these characters like Mia and Lila and Gary on Instagram now. It's sort of so disappointing that they're not real and I can't find them online and see what they look like and act like.
I mean, someone out there can change that. I mean, someone can make, Instagram pages for them.
I would love that. I feel so if you're listening, folks, I would love that if you did that. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about how we met because most people I have on my show, I don't actually know. But Alison, you and I met earlier this year. I think it was in January or February or something. And at that time, you were it's so funny for me to think about it now because you were just very humble and self-deprecating about your third book. And you came across to me, we were just getting to know each other. And I was okay, so you're a writer, tell me about your books. And you're oh, I have a few books out. And this next book, I just added a little plot to it. So my agent and editor have high hopes for it. And it was just so And then I later found out that like you knew all the while that it was going to be a Jenna pick, that it was going to be this big thing. And so I just want to start the interview by saying props to you that you disguised that so well.
I mean, you'll never trust me again, I guess.
That is true.
I had to
That
work
is true.
so hard at that poker face, man. Oh God.
Now we were sort of like at a party with some other people that you knew better than me. It's like, I mean, you don't have to disclose everything, but I'm just putting you on the spot here. But like, was I like the only one who didn't know, or was this like top
I feel like
secret?
we're like rehashing some important friendship stuff here. Live.
We are like live.
I lied to just you, Mark. No. No one. No, you. No one knew. Yeah.
No one knew.
It was the secret of all secrets. Yeah.
Oh my God.
For me, my life. Yeah.
And I'm curious, was that like? I'm sure you had a number of calls with Jenna and your publisher about this, but like, was that like sort of like they sent you some non-disclosure, or was it just kind of sternly said to you, like, Alison, you shall say nothing?
Yeah, they said it just like that. There was never formalized in that way, but it never in like written form. I didn't sign an NDA or anything like that. It was just sort of like, this is, confidential until it's announced. So,
Got it.
So I mean, it's such a big opportunity, I every day worried about it going away somehow. So I was like, you are not telling anyone. I learned a lot about myself. I can keep a secret.
Yes. It's funny. I planned a surprise party for my wife once, and she was like, after, she was just sort of like, that's weird because you were lying to me for like 6 months. And like, we came up with this phrase in the house called deception for good. That's what this was. It was deception for good.
But it still feels weird, right? I mean, I actually did feel, especially as I got closer and closer, I felt like I was actively lying to people. But it
hurt, and it hurt.
Oh, yeah. Now we'll never be the same. Yeah. I traded you in for the Today Show. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah. I know where I stand. Yeah. So, and also just because I'm like so interested, and I think a lot of people are just kind of interested in how these things work, because getting picked by Jenna is like really one of the biggest things out there for a writer. Mm-hmm. How long ago did it happen? Like,
I might be inaccurate here, but I without like consulting my email to look at the date, I would say about 10 months prior to the announcement.
Okay, so sort of almost just before we met, like maybe in like late last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a new secret. I was just eager to tell everyone, so I can't believe
eager to not tell everybody.
I mean, I was, but very equally eager to keep it inside. There was a lot writing on it. So yeah, so it was a long time. I mean, at first it was really hard, and then I just kind of forgot about it as much as you can forget about it. And I think that's when we met, when I just like wasn't actively thinking about it.
So it wasn't really a lie. I understand.
Yeah, it wasn't really a lie. Yeah.
This is sort of like a therapy session for me, just so you know.
Sorry, listeners. we should have dealt with this at 1 p.m. Yeah.
And one other thing I saw in your acknowledgments, you were like, giving a shout out to your team about kind of supporting it when the book was in its infancy stages and was sort of just a proposal. I'm also curious, like, was the book like totally written at the time that Jenna picked it up, or was it sort of not quite there yet, or what?
Yeah, it was like 99% written. I mean, it still had to go through one editing stage or two editing stages. But I believe what was sent to them was a bound manuscript. So
awesome.
Yeah, it wasn't just a proposal. It was like she had read it, everyone had read it. And then she decided.
That's so great. All right.
Once you do that, you can change the characters' names, which I really didn't know was going to happen. I thought two more rounds.
You cannot, or you can change?
I mean, you can, but they were like, well, it's the only time she's going to read it. So if you change Matt's name to Lenny, like, she'll have no idea who you're talking about. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, she would like have you on the show. And, like,
I got caught with a couple of names I had to keep. Yeah.
All right. So moving on finally from like our legendary meeting. How has it been, by the way? Like, you have been everywhere in the last few weeks, and you've been on national TV and all the things. I'm just kind of curious. Like, I mean, I think your first two books, like, they did pretty well and they got a lot of critical praise, but I mean, there's just sort of nothing like the ride you get on like an Oprah or a Jenna book club pick. How has it been?
It's been so amazing. As it has been equal parts amazing, wonderful, and terrifying and exhausting. You know, I mean, it's everything. But yeah, this is my third book, so I will say I was caught by surprise. I mean, I think when you're publishing your third book, you're kind of like, well, I'm not, you know, like it's not my seventh book, you know, but it's like I have a good sense of how this is going to go. You know, critics seem to say nice things about it for the most part. Like a good amount of people read it, but it's never a bestseller, you know, like, and that's fine. You know, I'm kind of happy with I was happy with my place in the writing world. So I just really was, even when I knew it was coming, I like once she had chosen the book and I knew I'd go on the Today Show with Hoda and Jenna, I still just didn't understand what that would mean exactly. You know, like I couldn't really imagine it. So it's just been amazing. And I mean, this was a book I was very afraid to write, and we can certainly talk about that at some point. I started it many years ago and abandoned it for a bunch of reasons. So to just have so many people come out of the woodwork and embrace it is really like the most amazing part of it, right? To be afraid to say something and then say it and then have everyone say, way to go, you said it. Yeah, that's really lovely.
All right, I do want to get into the writing of the book, and usually I save questions to the end, but Katie here asked a question that's pertinent for what we were just talking about. What did you do on pub day?
What did I do on pub day? This pub day, I was taking a train back from New York City. I had just done a pre-release event at Barnes & Noble in Brooklyn the night before. And I was almost late for a train and I was in the backseat of the Uber, like asking the Uber driver how many minutes exactly to Penn Station. And he was giving me life wisdom about how to relax because I was going to miss my launch if I didn't make this train. And there's no way to articulate that, you know, without sounding like an asshole. But I was like, yeah, I'm relaxed. I'm totally relaxed. But what time exactly do you think? So that was like the morning and the afternoon. And then I spent it at Riff Raff, which is a local independent bookstore in Providence, a great bookstore. And I had a launch there with you know, friends around town and strangers.
Yeah, I was out of town for that. I would have loved to come, but I did an event at Riff Raff too. Riff Raff Bookstore in Providence. It's amazing. People check it out. Let's talk about like the writing of this book. First book came out in 2011. Next book came out in 2022. Book after that, I assume, would come out in 2033. But no, it came out like 2 years later. So what was up with like really long time, first two books, very short time, third book?
Yeah. That's a good question. That's something like everyone in my family has asked me, you know, while it was happening. They're like, what's going on here? Why is this taking so long? Or, it wasn't, you know, the first book people have said about first books, like you've been writing your first book your whole life, which I felt was true of me, you know, just collecting things, writing things over and over again. And really when I was done with graduate school, I was like, okay, this is it. This is my first book. And I sent it out into the world. And then it felt like, not like I didn't have material, but that I didn't have material that had, I guess, simmered for long enough. Or, I didn't know that at first. You know, I think I sent 2 terrible novels to my agent almost immediately after publishing The Adults, my first book. And she very kindly was like, you know what, maybe let's just let these sit for a bit, you know, and just, it's not quite right. So, and that was hard. I mean, that certainly shook my confidence and definitely made me ask questions like, am I just, you know, a one book woman? Or I don't know if that's a phrase, but it is now. And I think because my confidence wobbled, I would start projects, I'd get really into them, and then I'd doubt them so intensely I would abandon them. And that I think that went on for 5 or 6 years of just me, anyone I knew at that time, they're like, how's the book? And I'm like, well, it's a different book now. They couldn't keep up. People stopped asking. So so it took a while to get through that period, whatever that was. And then for one reason or another, I just kind of committed to Notes on Your Sudden Disappearance. And like I just said, this is the book. I mean, I guess almost like a marriage, like I'm choosing you, and I don't know if this is going to work or if it's going to be any good, but I'm doing it.
So romantic.
Yeah, I know.
Those sound like your vows.
Marry me, those are my vows. Yeah. I'll stick with you, right? Like I stuck with you. There were times when I was like, I think I should abandon this book, but I didn't, and I just kept going. And once that was done, I said never again, like that's not going to be my writing process. I can't do that again. And so I kind of practiced these just very like 9 to 5 writing habits. Like you're just gonna wake up, you're just gonna do it. You don't need to have the magic with you. You're just gonna work like the way you would plan a syllabus. You're just gonna do it because and I found that working more deliberately like that just changed the whole thing. So that really just helped me get through a book much quicker.
Wait, so sorry, so you like had this period of doubt and trying different books, and then finally you stuck with Notes on Your Sudden Disappearance. But I'm sorry, how did the wedding
how did the third one come up?
Yeah.
Well, that was actually one of the abandoned projects from years ago. Yeah,
like one of the first ones that you sent to your agent after the first book?
No. That was that one. That was like deep insecurity, so I showed no one that. Like
right.
When I remember writing. I used to work at weddings, so I always had all this wedding material that I was like, I want to use this. I don't know how. And when I was, I took a break from Notes on Your Sudden Disappearance, and I started writing The Wedding People. It was called The Wedding Night at the time because it was very clearly a reaction to how long everything was taking me. I was like, this novel is going to be set over the course of one single day, one night. That's it. Like I thought that can't get me in too much trouble. That's not going to be a 20-year project. And I, had this woman showing up at this hotel who she abandoned all of her responsibilities. She's kind of checking into this luxurious Newport hotel. But I didn't really know why. And as I kept writing my way into that project, I had the bride character saying, well, why are you here? Why are you here? Why are you here? Which was really my question as a writer. I didn't know. And she, Phoebe, the narrator, says, I'm here to end my life. And I thought, nope, I'm not writing that book. But I knew that's the way the story would have to go. I knew it was right. But I was like, no, I can't write this right now. It's just not I don't know. When I mentioned I was afraid to write this book, that's sort of like, that's what put me off of it.
Why? Is it was just like too big or too serious or too much of a risk or what?
I really just wanted it to be this like fantasy book, like I wanted it to be this fun, like she's going to this hotel. I don't know why. Kind of like, is she there to meet an ex-lover? Is she there to, like I wanted it to be a little frothier, mostly just as a break for myself as a writer, because my last book was a little heavier. And I wasn't even really thinking about the book. It's like, I wasn't yet thinking about, well, what does the book need? I was thinking, what do I need as a writer? And it was like a vacation. I need to abandon all my responsibilities and just go to a hotel for a while and relax. So that's really where my head was at. Yeah. And so I picked it back up, years later, going through like, I have a lot of, I'm sure you do too, where like folders where you just put like your trash or what you call your trash and abandoned projects. And so I just remember rereading that opening chapter and it hooked me. And I thought, is she going to, oh my God, is she going to do it? And like, what? Why did I let this go? So that was a great realization. And that's what I meant about simmering, like I could only get to that place after I let it sit for so long. I read it like a stranger would read it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I had a very similar experience recently, and like sort of the project I'm working on now is something that I set aside 8 years ago, and I just picked it up randomly like 3 months ago, and I was like, wait a second. And I actually like, I don't want to make it about me and my project, which I don't even want to talk about anyway, but I will say this about that experience, and I'm wondering if you had the same experience. The experience I had was I was reading it and I was like, oh my God, like this is so good, but it's also, I can see exactly what's wrong with it.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't know how to fix it back then, but oh boy, I know like just how to fix it now. Was that sort of what you went through too?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm an overwriter, so I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I had pages, so many extra pages. I had front loaded it with all the backstory. I had her in a very long cab ride before
Mm-hmm.
even arriving at the hotel, and you learned everything about her marriage. You knew exactly why she was there. And rereading it, that slowed me down, but
Yeah.
also I was like, I don't need to know that yet. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of wondering where she is and what she's looking at, and I just want to be grounded in the moment. So I went back, and really it was so much easier to just cut those things out and repurpose them later when it was time for that backstory.
Oh, so a pro writer tip right there, because I thought one of the best things about how this book worked was the absolute deft way, the timing of the unloading of the backstory. It was just sort of like just when you needed to know it, and it was just enough of it, and it allowed for the book to have like a lot of surprises. I just thought it's so interesting that you had all the backstory front loaded before, because I thought one of the best things about the book was the way backstory was handled. And interesting, you clearly figured that part of it out.
Yeah, I mean, that was a gift of having that time, being able to read it like a stranger would, or like an editor would, being like,
Mm-hmm.
we don't need that. I'm not wondering that yet. But it was also, I think, partly a response to not knowing where I was going. I tend to write like that, which can be a little time consuming, a little frustrating. I know you're a big outliner. All right. I mean, that's what I recall from our conversations.
No,
Yeah.
I lied to you about that. That's
Oh,
it's not.
gosh. I'll never, we'll
Touche.
never know what's true. I know.
No, that is true. That is true about me.
But yeah. You just seem like an outliner. You're very organized.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna pry that one back, but go ahead.
Um, and yeah, so partly when I was writing it, I didn't always know, in that opening, when I was writing it years ago, like someone's like, why is she here? Why are you here? And
Mhm.
I don't really know yet, right? So I'm
Mhm.
just kind of answering it a little bit and then
Mhm.
moving on to the next beat.
Yeah. It's so well done. It's just it's extremely well paced. I mean, I'm huge on pacing, huge on structure, and this book had those things, and so many books don't. And I just feel like it's such a big thing about what makes books appealing to me. And I do think this is a topic for another time, but I do think that like when books really reach a wide audience, often the pacing is just terrific. And the pacing was terrific here. I want to go back to our first meeting again, because I just want to like dig into this actual thing that you said to me, which I really remembered. And I like thought about after that, you said like you had just had this very, in retrospect, even more shockingly humble and self-deprecating way about you, like already knowing that your book was going to be a hit. You were just like, yeah, well, I just tried to add a little plot this time, and the suggestion was like different from your first two books. You're going to go do some plot this time. And I just wanted to talk about that. Like, we've already talked about in the show a little bit about how, you kind of have this gathering kind of process, right? It seems like your writing style was more intuitive and not so outliney. So I guess my question to you is like, was that really hard for you to be more story focused? And like, how, to the extent that you sort of like had to pick up some chops, like in that part of your toolkit or whatever, right? Like, how did you learn that, the
Hmm.
story part of it?
I think a lot of that came honestly, from teaching. I mean,
Mm,
it's plot is something I always do in like the first week or two of all of my fiction classes, or really any of my creative writing classes. And just really think about it in its most basic form. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so clear to me, whenever I teach a story, I'm like, yeah, the story works because of what's happening here with the plot.
Mm.
And I, would break it down, and in each story, sort of the plot would seem different, but if you really, really analyze them all, they're kind of not all the same thing, but a lot of it boils down to I am feeling this as the narrator, and it is not in harmony with my surroundings, right?
Yeah.
Any story that grabbed me, any story, usually I teach stories that really that I just love. They tend to be doing that, and so I think my other books do that, but I didn't think that way deliberately going into them.
Mm-hmm.
It was more of like an editing process. Plot was like an editing process I applied to those books and thought, okay, what's going on here? How do I tease out a plot? Whereas this one really began with plot. It began with that idea of, okay, this woman is walking into a hotel,
Mm.
is feeling something intensely. Why is it not in harmony with everything that's going on at the hotel? So she's
Mm.
coming in unbearably sad. And I thought,
Mm.
wow, what's the worst place to be sad? A wedding.
Yep. Yep.
And you're the
And
only one that's
mm-hmm.
not there for the wedding, and you're the only one that's sad. And here's the bride coming in, and she's banned sadness. So that to me is a plot, right? You've got these opposing forces right away.
Well, and it's so amazing to me because, like, in my imagination, like the way you wrote this, it's so funny to think about it now, having heard how you actually wrote this. I was like, a few hours ago, as I was preparing for this, I was like, you know what I bet? This is like shows how great my instincts are. I was like, I bet she just wrote this up as a high concept pitch and sold it on the pitch, because the high concept pitch is so good that, like, a woman is so depressed that she wants to kill herself, and she checks into a hotel where there's this massive, overpriced, insane wedding with this bridezilla. And the first person she meets is the bridezilla, and she tells her, I'm here to kill myself. And the bridezilla is like, no, you're not. And like, and then I could add a few more sentences that would like include all the great twists in the plot, because there's so many great things that happen, and the ending is so great and so satisfying. But to me, I was like, the high concept and the pitch that you can pull out of this book is just A+. And it's just amazing that you kind of backed and wound and twisted your way kind of through this intuitive process into like this, frankly, like perfectly plotted story.
Oh, well, wow. Thank you. That is a really nice compliment. Yeah, I did kind of walk backwards into it. I mean, I think when you have, I guess this is why I often teach this way. Like, I think if you have that initial conflicting tension, whatever it is, I think you're going to find that it allows, it gives you things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if if Phoebe is walking into the hotel with unbearable sadness and the bride has banned sadness, right? Or if Phoebe is saying like, this is my last night on Earth, I'm going to spend it in a really decadent way, well, then everyone at the hotel is going to be rich, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
or it gives you
Mm-hmm.
that if you just keep following that central tension,
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll uncover and unpack things, and it'll feel like a gift, like, wow, that's amazing. Of course, that makes perfect sense. So that really helps, but it can feel like, it can feel like a total surprise, but there's a logic there, I think.
Yeah.
That's
totally.
why I like trusting that tension, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
trusting that it'll lead you places, at least for me, tends to work, or is like the guiding post for me.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's such just a great setup. And it also, so I just want to talk for a second about how funny this book is. I mean, really, really one of the funniest books I've read in some time. And like the setup, just to give people a taste of like how funny it is. Like I died at this line. So she's like walks in. So Phoebe is the main character who's going to kill herself. And she meets the bride, and the bride, she says, I'm going to kill myself. And Leela, is it Leela or Lila? Lila. So Lila, the bride, says to her, you can't kill yourself. This is the biggest week of my life. And then Phoebe's like, same. Just, and then it goes on. It's like not a spoiler, but it's like Lila is like just this kind of person who like then starts to bargain with her, and she's like, well, okay, well, how about this? How about like I like pay for your hotel room so you can like kill yourself next week? I mean, it's so good. It's like not only is like the banter funny, but like the idea and the concept is so funny and the way it plays out. So I guess my question to you is just I'm very curious about really funny people. And I'm wondering basically, do you try to be funny? Do you have like the pressure on you to be funny? Do you have like a technique? Or is it just one of these things where it's like you just are being genuine and you just are funny?
I mean, I feel like there's no way to answer this question. I will try though. I think I'm just awkward. I don't know. And I think people find that funny. I mean, okay, if we're going to do a deep dive here, I will say, you know, I grew up, I think it is part compulsion. Like it is just the way I was raised. And, you know, I lost a brother when I was a teenager. We were teenagers, and that was a really, as you can imagine, like dark cloud over my adolescence, over my, you know, family. And something about being a teenager really clashed with that, right? Like, and I felt like, okay, yes, this is the saddest thing. It, you know, really depressed me for a long time. It was something that was very hard to kind of move on from. At the same time, I wanted to go to the mall. I wanted to go to the movies and watch Mr. Bean with my friends, or like there was this incongruity between like this grave thing happening in my life and then like the superficiality of teen life and like my desires and the things that people would talk about. I mean, I remember thinking like after it happened, okay, like I'm never gonna laugh again, actually. Like I couldn't imagine it just because it was so sudden, and I couldn't imagine things not ever being serious again. And that day I laughed because my friend came over, and we were just sitting on my bed, and we were, you know, trying to make conversation as best we could. And at some point she goes, you know, she's like, our friend is really mad at us right now. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, she's left out. You didn't invite her over. You just invited me. And we started laughing so hard.
Oh my God.
Because I was like, oh my goodness, middle school life is hilarious. like someone is mad at me on the day that my brother died because I didn't invite them over. You know what I mean? Like, and that to me really was the beginning of this kind of humor. Like it's not that my brother's death is funny, of course. It's like that clashing with everything else. And I just keep running into that in life. You know, you're feeling something so intensely. You're breaking up with someone at the airport, and a guy in a cabana shirt bumps into you, and it's like hilarious for some reason because you're crying and he's smiling. Like, and that's really the humor of this book, which is like Phoebe coming into this elevator with so much despair, and Lila just like being like, no, I don't care. Like my wedding. And that stuff to me is funny. I don't know.
Well, that bridges to like another topic that I wanted to talk about. I mean, like that's sort of like an amazing story about how you, at a very young age, I mean, you must have been about 10 or 11 or however old you were at that point, like just coming up with this coping mechanism that has like stuck with you through your life, that you are able to kind of laugh in these moments of real darkness. And I just think like, to me, that is like really what takes this book from like one level to this like absolute highest level. And like, I think part of why people are responding the way they are is because it's not only funny, but it also deals with a bunch of serious issues. And there's always the kind of the base there with the trouble. I mean, there's difficulties having children, there's depression, there's divorce, there's obviously suicide. I think like in your other books, death is an issue, like your Audible books. I mean, death is sort of always kind of a specter there that you're dealing with sort of beneath the surface or overtly. And I guess like, I just wanted to say that I definitely appreciated that. And I feel like it did make the book, it helped the book not just seem like only, like, not only funny. Maybe that's just a super clumsy way of repeating myself. But anyway, I just appreciated that there was more depth to it and kind of some darkness in it too.
Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah. And I mean, I think that was certainly something I resisted at first. When I was talking about not wanting to write this story or abandoning it, it's like I had this idea that, okay, I'm done with death, or I'm done with the sad parts of the world in my writing. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
gonna move on to something lighter or something a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more fun. And it was this resisting, I think, in my writing of really just sort of what I wanted to do in my actual life, right? Like, enough already. Like,
Mm.
can't things just be like a rosy rom-com for the rest of time? It's like, why not? That'd be so
Yeah.
nice. But it never is. And I whenever I'm watching movies or reading books and they don't really include that kind of darkness,
Mm.
I sort of just feel like it's missing something. Like,
Yeah.
that was entertaining, that was nice, but that wasn't life. Like, or that
Yeah.
doesn't really speak to my experience of life.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I think the darker something is, actually the more hilarity that is available. Like, I mean,
You need a
that
release
story
from all that
that
darkness.
story that I told you about, the middle school
Yeah.
ridiculousness, like, that wouldn't have been funny to me if I had just stubbed my toe, or
Mm-hmm.
like, it was only funny because I was having the worst day of my life. And
Oh
yet,
my God.
like, it couldn't penetrate the middle school veneer of whatever was happening there,
Yeah.
So yeah. And I had a teacher who told me that when I was very young. She had lost a brother too, and she would take me out to lunch and we'd just talk about our sad lives. But it was very helpful to me. I mean, I didn't quite believe her fully yet, but I remember her saying something like that, like, you're experiencing an intense low right now, but your range is going to be wide. Like, you're
Mm.
going to have incredible highs because you have felt this, right? It
Mm-hmm.
gives you something later. I mean,
Yeah.
and I thought, no way, but she was right.
Yeah. I always find that, by the way, like just kind of on a almost daily or weekly basis, just kind of in a smaller way, just that like if I have like a really bad day where I'm really glum, I sort of
Mhm.
know like the next day is going to be brighter. You're just going to feel better. And also
Yeah,
conversely, I know when I'm having like a great day, I'm like,
right. You're like,
probably
oh
going to
no,
crash
I'm
tomorrow.
in for it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Better stay inside. Yeah.
Yeah. Time is flying here. There's a few other things I wanted to get through. I would say like one of like the substantive kind of, I wouldn't call it a dark idea, but just like, sort of like one of the themes of the book that you really grapple with through a few different characters is like this idea of being like fully alive. You have characters in the book that say like they feel like they're vanishing in their own lives. They feel like they don't have the confidence to live maybe how other people live or how they feel like they ought to live. And so, like in all great storytelling, we watch these characters do really wild things, like, for example, try to kill themselves or try to break up their marriage. All kind of, it seems like under this larger umbrella of they feel trapped in who they are, this idea of who they are. It's funny. I have a friend who's a screenwriter, and he said to me once, he's like, every single Hollywood movie could be titled Trapped, like all caps with an exclamation point, because it's like in every story, like the character is like trapped in some way. And I think that is like so true. And I just think like many of the characters in this book are kind of trapped in that similar way, in a certain kind of midlife way, or they're kind of like heading towards adulthood or in adulthood. And they're like, wait a second, is this really who I am? Is this all there is? So anyway, I just kind of wanted to ask you about that and just like say, like, is this, sort of like one of the main topics? I mean, you're so young, but like of midlife, say like once you get out of college, right? Like, is this when people start grappling with this idea of like, am I fully alive? And is there a way to become fully alive short of, doing something drastic like the characters in this book do?
Right. I mean, those are big questions. I don't know. I don't know if I'll fully answer them, but I will say, um, I think it is a particular question. I mean, of course, people can ask this at any point in their lives, but I think we tend to ask it in middle age because we spend our 20s and 30s just trying to create routines, just trying to have set patterns or consistency or reliability. I mean, I remember in my 30s having a job the same job that I would go to every day and see the same people was amazing to me. I thought,
Yeah.
wow, I cannot believe it. Like I can go tomorrow and it won't be taken away from me. Or like, I just thought that kind of stability was better than anything. Right. And so to kind of crawl into my 40s and think like, I guess I'm getting a little tired of that, or like, and just to start to feel a different feeling about those routines. And it doesn't have to be a bad feeling necessarily. It's just sort of the feeling of routine, or it's the feeling of, okay, every day I get up and I do this because this is what I do. And that kind of phrasing eliminates desire from the equation. It's not like, oh, I'm getting up to do this because I desperately want to. It's I'm getting up to do this because it's just what I do. It's who I am, or it's who I've decided I am. So, so I don't know. I mean, I think I don't know if there is a way, if you're someone who craves stability and craves like having, like consistent friends and a consistent kind of lifestyle. I think there's some element of maybe always feeling a little trapped in that, just because it in some ways is a role that you're playing, and it can't, some days you just aren't in the mood for it, right?
Yeah. I heard this great quote recently that the first half of life is about putting on a mask and the second half of life is about taking it off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think for me, like, if you're saying, well, do we always have to do something drastic like move to Rhode Island? No, you don't. Though I highly suggest it. It's beautiful. I think honesty is the daring thing. And that's so much part of the book, is that everyone in this book is having the opportunity to become honest about something that they think they cannot say out loud, something they think will ruin their lives, and yet they do it. And I really wanted to reward them for that honesty, because I'm very terrified of honesty. As you know, I lied to you. But I always think it's going to ruin my life or end relationships. And it sometimes it does, but that's for the best. Usually it brings me closer to people, or it becomes a spark of connection. And so every time after, I'm like, why was I so afraid to just say that? This book is really sort of all these characters having the opportunity to just say it. And mostly be rewarded for it, I think.
I love that. And I feel like it's funny, like I'm in like writer critique groups a lot. And I feel like sometimes like that it's a kind of a note that I give to people. I'm like, okay, well, you have them like thinking this thing that they so badly want to say. I'm just like, that's what fiction is for. It's like in real life, you have to bottle that up. But fiction is about letting them just like let her rip,
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember one of the things that my agent said to me when I gave her one of those bad manuscripts. She's like, you have all these people in a room, but then they immediately leave the room. It's like the stage is set for drama, and then they just all go home.
I'm just like imagining, like, sorry, go ahead.
God, you're right. Like, I'm afraid of drama. I like want them out of the room in their separate areas as soon as possible. And so to me, ever since then, fiction is about keeping them in the room, keeping them in this hotel, and not letting them leave until they say whatever it is.
I mean, that is like a primo piece of writing advice. Just like boil it all down. Just keep them in the room. Nobody leaves the room.
It's like you move all the furniture, and I just don't lock the door. Yeah.
I see we have a lot of questions from the audience. I want to get to those. Thank you, everybody, for those. We'll get to those in a couple minutes. A few more questions from me. I sometimes do a thing on my show called 2-minute MFA, which
Oh.
is that anybody who's a writing teacher gets this question, and that is what you are. And so what I want to say to you is this, like, you have been teaching students how to write. You've been reading so much student work over the years and so on and so forth. And you probably by this point have a few core principles. I mean, I think maybe. And I guess the question is just kind of, if there's like a huge piece of advice that you give people that you think is particular to you. It could be that like this is a common piece of writing advice that you think bears repeating, but I'm also wondering if maybe there's like a particularly Alison Espach like piece of writing advice that you just think people don't emphasize enough.
I think like what I will say is kind of common, but it is also particular to me in that it's the thing I go to. It's like what generates most of my writing. And it is sort of what I was saying earlier, that like creating this character, for me, I never worked well with like character sketches or, feel like, how old is Ted? Oh, Ted's 37. Ted has a tattoo of Donald Duck. Like, I got bored filling those out and I stopped halfway through. And then I thought, oh, well, I guess I don't care about character. But to me, that's not the interesting way into character. For me, it's very much that, okay, here's Ted. Like, when was the last time he was feeling something he shouldn't be feeling? And what was it? And where was he? And why, what's going on there? Set the scene. So that's really almost always where I start, just because that's just endlessly fascinating to me. I don't know why, but it is.
Wait. I really want to dig into this. So you're saying the piece of advice is think back to the time your character was feeling something they shouldn't be feeling.
Yeah.
And that is just sort of like a writing prompt, or are you saying it's more than that? Like that's sort of where the core of the story usually is, or
I
what?
think that's where the core of the story is. I mean, not always, but I think if you pick the right thing, like there's a whole novel there, I mean, it can be something as silly as like Ted was bored on a roller coaster, right? Like, I don't know if that's the novel I'm going to write, but like certainly an odd moment, right? It makes you wonder about Ted. Why is he so dead inside, right? But if you think about like, okay, Ted is standing at the altar and he's disappointed. He's about to say his vows and he feels sad or disappointed. Like, there's a novel, I mean,
this is amazing.
How did he get there? Is it, what's going to happen if he says I do, right? And unpacking that disappointment and that sadness, trying to explain it. And so to me, it's plot condensed into very manageable, non-technical terms.
That is such an amazing piece of writing advice. I've never, in all the times I've been asking that question, I've never heard that answer. I've never heard anybody say that. That's freaking awesome. I'm going to like use that.
You should.
I'm going to tell people about it. I'm going to spread the word. That is a great piece of advice.
Well, and because I think it also matches sort of why I start writing, right? It's like, I think I started writing because I was feeling things I felt like I shouldn't be feeling. Like, if we're going back to my experience with losing my brother, like, I remember still looking around and seeing all the funny things that were happening in the world. And I felt like I couldn't say them out loud. So I would just write them down, and then, or if I had an observation about what was going on, it just felt rude or inappropriate, I would write it down. Right. So that, I think that's why it works for me in particular, because that is why I go to the page.
That is terrific. All right. Last question for me, and then we'll take some from the audience. In your acknowledgements, you had this very touching passage that you closed with, again, something that I've like never seen in acknowledgements before. And basically the heart of this, what you say is, I just want to say thank you to all the strangers. Like everybody who just stopped and talked to me on an airplane or said hi to me at a bus stop, or you list these different things. And then you say, this is my love letter to all the strangers who said hello. I found it touching, but I'm just deeply curious. Like, tell me about that.
Yeah. I very much meant that. And I think, after my parents read that, they're like, come on, really? Like,
Like, we're right here.
Strangers after
Yeah.
everything we did, like people you don't even know. It's like, sorry guys, but I think they do play an important role in my life, at least. I don't know if they do for everyone. You know, when you're having a bad day, or maybe you just feel invisible or something, and then someone just starts talking to you, and you know, that might not always be desired, but I think sometimes it can have a really transformative effect where you're like, oh yeah, they can see me. Oh yeah, I'm a person in this room. And yeah, I'm a real person, right? Like, I don't know, it kind of brings me out of myself in really important ways. And there's also just such an honesty, I think, there's such potential for honesty with strangers. I love strangers, as you know, because I put it in the book. Not everyone loves strangers. I have since learned, just by having friends and dating people, right? If you're going to a party and you don't know anyone, and I'm like, oh, you know, or they're like, this is going to be terrible, we don't know anyone. I'm always like, oh, this is going to be amazing. Like, we don't know anyone. We're free. We can be anyone we want. Like, we can just say anything, and they're going to leave your life, and it's not going to matter. So I've always found, like, on airplanes or in bars or wherever I kind of strike up a conversation with a stranger, I've wound up saying things that I haven't told my closest friends or something, or you just say it in a slightly different way that feels maybe more honest and less worried about their reaction, right? Because we're not trying to manage this relationship for the rest of the time, and more just about the freedom of saying it.
And indeed, Phoebe has a few moments like that that are consequential in the book, where she just says what she feels to a stranger, and boy, is that exciting.
That is the whole book. Yeah.
That is the whole book. Okay, let's take a few questions here. Renee and Robin, it's great to have you back on the show. Renee asked, do you like to attend weddings? Somebody who's written about it and worked in that industry, do you like to attend them now?
I do love attending weddings. I mean, I knew I loved weddings after working at weddings, because I was like, I'm here every night basically watching some wedding that I care nothing about. You know, I mean, I don't know the people, I don't know their love, and yet I'd always cry during the speeches or like during the dances. They weddings work on me. They like make me feel shit. And I guess that's what ceremonies are for, right? I mean, and
especially here, if you hear like some great vows, like, I guess we're doing this, we'll stick together.
We're committing to it. Doesn't matter if we like it. We're just gonna ride this one out. And I think, you know, they're so formulaic, but I think it's just like writing. Even within the formula gives way for individuality. Like it, you know, everyone is making, you know, oh, now it's the maid of honor speech. Yes, every wedding has this, and yet no one's going to give a maid of honor speech like this friend for this particular bride, right? And you learn the specificity, and there's just so much going on there. So, I mean, I like it. I like weddings as a writer, especially, but I still do like it as a human being. I think it's so rare to just have a chance to come together with so many people and celebrate. I think that's the thing I've appreciated them more as I've gotten older, because it just feels like, wow, look at everything that goes into creating a space for us to just celebrate people. Yeah.
Especially post-COVID. All right, one more question here from Katie. Do you see yourself in any of these characters?
Yeah, I think I'm all of the characters, honestly. I'm like a total narcissist now. I think it's sort of like dreams, you know, it's like everyone in your dreams is you in a way, or they argue that everyone in your dreams it's just you, because they're coming from your imagination. So each character, I think, is based off of some element of me, right? Like, I mean, for Lila, you know, I think I would naturally be like, oh yeah, I relate more to Phoebe. There's a lot of obvious overlap there. Lila, I'm not a Lila. I'm not a type A person. I'm not the bridezilla. And yet I was, you know, when the bride is saying, no, 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 you can't be sad here. That's me. That's me
Mm.
saying to myself, no, 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 you can't write this sad book. You can't write this
Oh,
sad book. Write a fun book. Come on.
oh,
Like
that's
the
fascinating.
self-policing shaming of sadness that's always in my head that is fighting the Phoebe who is saying, come on, let's just acknowledge it. This is life, right? So
Ooh.
that's very much like I can see myself in all the characters and in that way. I am not Lila, I'm not Jim, right? But there's a kernel of me for sure.
I'm like deeply moved by the fact that like rethinking your entire book now as like the conflict between Phoebe and Lila as being
Yes,
this
very
kind of
meta.
war between these two parts of yourself. That's like,
Yeah.
it's very moving to think about it that way, actually.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, it's unsettling to live, but
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah. But I'm glad Phoebe and the book won out.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. All right. Well, folks, the book is The Wedding People. It's really wonderful if you can't tell by now already. It gets my highest recommendation. It's got everything. It's got the highs, it's got the lows, and it's just all throughout. It is just so, 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 so funny and so wise. There's just so many great kind of like little, like kind of, I wouldn't like throwaway passages. You just kind of like insert a little something and it's like, boom. Just like brilliant writing, brilliant white life wisdom. I love the whole freaking thing, honestly. So Alison, I always end on the same question, which is imagine that you have the ideal reader for The Wedding People, somebody who's just getting the book in the way you hope somebody would get it in your wildest dreams. And they've just finished the book. They close it, they put it in their lap, they look out the window. Describe in a phrase or even a single word, what is the feeling that person has?
Oh man, I will say I would say excited.
Mm.
All right. I mean, if we're just doing one word,
Yeah.
but really I would say feeling excited or encouraged to go say or do something they thought that they couldn't say or do.
I love it. Yeah, that's like what the whole book is about, really.
Yes.
And all the consequences and all the ups and downs that come from that. That's amazing. Folks, we got to run, but the book again is The Wedding People. Alison, I know you're like the woman of the summer here, and I just appreciate you taking an hour.
I think it's Taylor Swift, Mark.
Well, summer's not over, Alison. You're on the way up. But thank you. This has been so, so amazing. I forgive you for lying to me the first time we met.
Thank you.
This hasn't been awkward at all.
Not at all.
So thank you. And folks, we'll see you soon on The Thoughtful Bro. Please pick up Alison's book, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.